Okay, so again, this is your instructor for BA1 Microeconomics. Here are some additional illustrations on comparative and absolute advantage. So suppose there are two countries, we have Italy and France, who can produce wine and cloth. So here are the details on the bottles of wine and yards of cloth that each country can make. For Italy, it can make 430 bottles of wine and 550 yards of cloth, while France can make 350 bottles of wine and 300 yards of cloth. So let's compute the opportunity cost for Italy. So to make one bottle of wine, Italy has to forgo certain yards of cloth. So the formula would be yards of cloth over bottles of wine. So since we're looking for the opportunity cost of the bottle of wine, we will use the bottle of wine as the denominator. So that is 550 divided by 430. We will get 1.28 yards of cloth. So this means that for every one bottle of wine, Italy has to forgo 1.28 yards of cloth. For making 1 yard of cloth, we will be using the formula bottles of wine over yards of cloth to compute its opportunity cost. We are using the yards of cloth as denominator since the opportunity cost we're computing is for the yards of cloth. So again, the formula is bottles of wine over yards of cloth. So that is 430 divided by 550. So we'll get 0.78. So in making 1 yard of cloth, it has to forgo 0.78 bottle of wine. Let's compute the opportunity cost for wine. For France, in making one bottle of wine. So the formula is yards of cloth over bottles of wine. We're using the bottles of wine as denominators since we're looking for the opportunity cost of one bottle of wine. That is 300 divided by 350. That is 0.86 yards of cloth. So this means that in making one bottle of wine, we will be foregoing 0.86 yards of cloth. So now let's compute the opportunity cost of 1 yard of cloth. The formula is bottles of wine over yards of cloth. So we're using the yards of cloth as denominator since we're looking for the opportunity cost of 1 yard of cloth. So that is 350 divided by 300, that is 1.17. So this means that we are foregoing 1.17 bottles of wine in order to make 1 yard of cloth. So in summary, the opportunity costs for making bottles of wine and yards of cloth would be as follows. For Italy, in order to make one bottle of wine, it has to forgo 1.28 yards of cloth. And for France, in order to make one bottle of wine, it has to forgo 0.86 yard of cloth. For making 1 yard of cloth, Italy has to forgo 0.78 bottle of wine. And for France, it has to forgo 1.17 bottle of wine. So again, opportunity cost is the benefit forgone. So let us determine now who has forgone an opportunity or a benefit at a lesser rate or cost compared to the other. So to determine the comparative advantage, we will be looking at which country or which entity has a lower opportunity cost compared to the other. So for making one bottle of wine, France has a lower opportunity cost. That is 0.86 yard of cloth. In making 1 yard of cloth, Italy has a lower opportunity cost of 0.78 bottle of wine. So in terms of making wine, France has a lower opportunity cost. Therefore, France has a comparative advantage in the production of wine. Meanwhile, since Italy has 0.78 bottle of wine as the opportunity cost for 1 yard of cloth, compared to France with 1.17 bottle of wine. Therefore, Italy has a comparative advantage in the production of cloth. So let us remember again that in determining which country or entity has a comparative advantage over the other, we have to look at the opportunity costs. So the country or entity with the lower opportunity cost has the comparative advantage. So in here, France has a comparative advantage in making wine because it will lose only 0.86 yard of cloth compared to Italy with 1.28 yards of cloth. Meanwhile, Italy has a comparative advantage in making cloth because it will lose lesser bottles of wine compared to France. Another example is for Maggie and Anna. They can make cake and loaf of bread. So let us compute their opportunity cost. To make one cake, so we'll be using the cake as denominator. So that would be 10 divided by 5. So that would be 2 loaves of bread. Meanwhile, for the loaves of bread, so we will be using the bread as denominator. So 5 divided by 10. So the opportunity cost to make a bread would be 0.50 cake. For Anna, making one cake would mean losing how many loaves of bread? So therefore, 12 divided by 8, that is 1.5 loaves of bread. And to make one loaf of bread, how many cakes will be forgone? So that would be 8 over 12, that is 0.67 cake. So looking at the opportunity cost for Maggie and Anna, Maggie will lose 2 loaves of bread if she makes one cake, while Anna will lose 1.5 loaves of bread if she will bake one cake. Between the two, Anna has a lower opportunity cost, so therefore, Anna has a comparative advantage over Maggie in baking one cake. Meanwhile, in baking one loaf of bread, Maggie will have to forgo 0.50 cake, while Anna will forgo 1.67 cake. Again, looking at the comparative advantage, we have to focus on the opportunity cost. Since Maggie has a lower opportunity cost, which is 0.50 compared to Anna, 0.67. Therefore, Maggie has a comparative advantage over Anna in terms of baking one loaf of bread. Now let's go to absolute advantage. Remember that absolute advantage looks on the efficiency of a country or an entity in producing goods and services. So there should be more output on the available inputs. So for example, if Japan and Italy can both produce automobiles, but Italy can produce sports cars of a higher quality and a faster rate with greater profit, then Italy has an absolute advantage compared to Japan. So therefore, Japan should devote its limited resources to another industry, for example, electric cars, so it can enjoy an absolute advantage. Another example, we have blue country and red country. So this table gives us the information on the number of R's in order to make good A and good B. Again, number of goods here would be only one, but we're looking at the number of R's to produce one unit. So for blue country, it will take 2 R's to make one good A, and red country will take 10 R's to produce good A. So between the two country, which country is more efficient? So since blue country can make one good A for only 2 R's compared to red country for 10 R's, then therefore blue country has an absolute advantage. Meanwhile, for good B, blue country will take 8 hours to produce one good bee, while red country would take 4 hours to produce good bee. So between the two country, which country is more efficient? So since red country can finish one good bee for only 4 hours compared to blue country, so therefore red country, it has an absolute advantage. So again, for absolute advantage, we're looking at how much we can produce in a given amount of inputs. For this example, we're using the R's. So at a minimal R, blue country can produce one good, which means blue country is more efficient. It will only take little amount of time to produce one good, which is good A for blue country. Meanwhile, for red country, it is more efficient in producing good B because it will only take 4 hours or a lower number of hours in producing one good B compared to blue country, which will take 8 hours to produce the same one quantity of good B. So again, comparative advantage looks on the opportunity cost, and absolute advantage looks on the efficiency. How many items can be produced for a certain number of inputs, such as hours to produce, resources needed to produce. So absolute advantage again is looking at the efficiency, the inputs and the outputs. So which country or entity can produce more at a limited amount of resources. Okay, that's all. I hope um, you gain more inputs and you get more clarification in terms of comparative and absolute advantage.